Heyo, it's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, episode 133, coming at you on the 24th of April 2019, and we're going to flip things around today. I'm going to do some previews, and then we'll talk about the fights that that happened at the weekend, because I missed my first podcast of the week, because it was the resurrection of our Lord and Saviour. So, it was bank holiday, so I just asked around, eating finger sandwiches and enjoying tea. But you got to flip things around and confuse the body to continue to have your MMA knowledge grow. So let's talk about some of the upcoming fights. The title of the episode today is "Everyone's Talking About Cory," because forever I have had people on my Facebook timeline being like, "Hey, you should talk about Cory Sandhagen. He's coming up on the regionals. Hey, you should talk about Cory Sandhagen. He's got his UFC debut. Hey, Cory Sandhagen just won his UFC debut." And then I realised that it was dudes like Sean Madden from Elevation and others from that team telling me to do it. But yeah, I've been watching Cory Sandhagen since he debuted in the UFC, and he's a very good fighter. And the interesting part of that, of course, is that this weekend Cory Sandhagen meets John Lineker, who will be a very severe test for him, or at least should be. Really, the best fighter that Sandhagen's fought so far has been Iuri Alcantara. He was due to go straight into the John Lineker match off that, but obviously some stuff happened. Fight fell through. Was it like twice it fell through, or they moved it and then it fell through again? But Lineker had a rib injury, and they replaced him with Mario Batista, who, wasn't Lineker level, obviously, and got fairly quickly smoked. But now we've moved to the fight again, and we're back on, and fight gods permitting, and John Lineker actually making weight. Actually, it doesn't really even matter if John Lineker makes weight. He never makes weight. But spare something nasty happening to John Lineker. We got a good fight coming up. Now, if you don't know Cory Sandhagen, where have you been? Now, he is a very interesting striker. He's got a lot of cool quirks. One of the things he does really well is get to the body. And if you get to the body, you're already head and shoulders above 75% of fighters in MMA. Because in MMA, there is only one target, and it's your head. Or the occasional really hard, naked, run-up low kick. But just Sandhagen's most recent fight will tell you why I love him, because he came out, jab, hook off the jab, hook off the jab, hooked the body off the jab, right low kick, hooked the body off the jab, right low kick. Just beautiful stuff. You got high-low combinations. You got going off the same hand, or hooking off the same hand as you jab. And then he knocked his man down as soon as he was nearing the fence, just by coming up the center with that. Aldo's team called it the pedalo, but I call it the Groenhart knee. Sometimes because Myrtle Groenhart has made a career out of getting dudes near the ropes, jumping in with that knee, and then scoring some points. It's an amazing entry. If you're gonna throw like a air hiking flying knee next to the cage at the time to do it, and really it just lets you get in and start working with more interesting stuff. It's a great time to start hitting the body. It's a great time to clinch. It's just like the only time that technique's really going to work well, because everywhere else in the ring or cage they have the opportunity to just step back as soon as you start running into your jump. But no, the knee slammed this dude Batista right in the face, put him on the mat, and there was some scrambly stuff, and then that was the end of that. Not going to advertise the dude as perfect though, of course. If you watched the Austin Arnett fight, I don't know if he's dropped away from this recently, but his last performance was very aggressive and quick, and the Alcantara fight was just all went tits up immediately, and he rallied from it, and you didn't really get a chance to see him do his usual thing. But in the Arnett fight especially, he was doing a lot of that fake step in, Dominic Cruz style step back into the opposite stance. They call it a retreating shift or something. It was something that they used to say Mendoza did a lot, and it really pissed people off, because he'd stand there, people would swing, and he'd step right back into the opposite stance as far as he could. It can get you into some trouble though. In that Arnett fight, anytime that he took the pressure off on a whim, he'd back up, and then he'd get by the fence, and he'd sort of not realise he was by the fence. And then Arnett would come in, and he'd try and step straight back, and it wouldn't really work. There was a good little moment in the first round of that fight where Arnett steps in just straight down the pipe with like a 1-2-1, or he's stepping with the straight punches. The stuff that I normally like, that'll get you counted a lot. Be very careful with that. But going straight down the center in combination seems to annoy Sandhagen, because he likes to do that step back, pull away so much. And I think if you're just throwing one strike at a time, which is what Arnett was doing most of that fight, at a guy like that, he's really just going to pull back and drop the counter on you immediately. So I think it's sometimes better to just follow in afterwards and tuck your chin down, bite your gum shield, and hope that you don't get hit very cleanly. Or, if you're better, you can fold behind your elbows or double jab in, fake double jab in, all those sort of things. But I think you've got to do more than one thing at Sandhagen because he does like pulling away and countering. Bear with me, turning the lights on. It's suddenly got dark at 3 p.m. But that happened a couple of times in the Austin Arnett fight. In the Iuri Alcantara fight, his footwork wasn't looking bad. He was moving, he was angling off as he retreated, but Alcantara very quickly put him on the fence and hit him there, and that set up the weird scramble over the back, overhook armbar, into triangle armbar, into Sandhagen surviving. But I think looking at Sandhagen's defensive tendencies, I think putting the cage at his back is going to be a useful thing for his opponents to do, either, both in striking and in grappling. If you want to clinch him up and tie him up along the fence, he has given up some fairly advantageous positions to opponents, and it's kind of like the Zabit thing. You're seeing these guys give up bad positions and then work out of them because they're a level above their opponent, or a couple of I hate doing levels above, but you know what I mean, where their overall game is, and their athleticism is so much more than their opponent, that they can start from these bad positions and work out of them. Whereas when you start meeting really good fighters, like the really, really good fighters, and you're not fucking saying levels again, and you're not considerably more athletic and skilled all around than them, that sort of starting 2 steps behind from that exchange is really gonna, that's when it catches up with you. So he's doing that against Arnett, and I noticed that, getting put on the fence with giving up underhooks and things like that, but also just putting his back foot to the fence, because so much of his defense is like hands down, pull the head away, or step straight back, or step back on the slight angle, the Israel Adesanya thing. But a lot of it is, a lot of good striking generally is time and measure, and I like using that phrase because that's on the very, very first pamphlet advertising James Figg, or it might be Jack Broughton, but one of the very first teachers of bare-knuckle pugilism was advertised as a master of time and measure. And really, if you think about it, that's what makes good striking. You need distance to move, and you need to get guys' timing down, and that's what a good striker is. Take away the space, the measure, and you've made it a lot harder for them. And that brings us on to John Lineker. Now, John Lineker is not a subtle fighter. He's not going to be out there feinting Cory Sandhagen with double jabs, throwing off his timing and stuff like that. He's probably going to get cracked with some counters, but he does have an iron jaw and incredibly heavy hands, and as ring cutting goes, he's not terrible. He's considerably better than the vast majority of fighters in MMA, but he actually does some, which is what's so brilliant. That being said, he's got a touch of the Rocky Marciano thing, where he has this very, very short reach, and then he swings with straight arms in circles rather than straight hitting. He's not going to be double jabbing Sandhagen and cracking him while he's leaning back or stepping back. He's going to be going straight after him and trying to dig to the body. Now, I like that because, again, as we said, the fence is going to be a problem for Sandhagen, or could be a problem for Sandhagen, and when while he's good at moving his head back and out of the way, the body doesn't move. The body is there a lot of the time, especially if you put them on the fence and they can't step. That is all John Lineker does. He puts people on the fence and smashes their body and head. So that will be really exciting. For Sandhagen in this fight, I think really, I'm loath to tell you to watch a John Dodson fight because he's so fucking boring. But the John Dodson-John Lineker fight was surprisingly good, and it also showed you the problems or really how to handle John Lineker. I think Lineker actually won the decision on that one. Probably shouldn't have. Yeah, got a split decision. God, was that 2016? I feel like life is slipping away. But lots of direction changes, and those, he's pumping those annoying double and triple left straights and running out to the side. But what you saw in the last round, Dodson wobbled him because Lineker's eyes were swollen badly. It's one thing to have an amazing chin, but as they always say, the shot that you don't see coming is the one that hurts. If you can close up someone's eyes, swell them shut, get them bleeding in their eyes with elbows and things like that, you have a great, you've got a much better chance of hurting them when you hit them stiff on the chin. I think that was with an uppercut too. Dodson had been mainly using straight hitting, and then he used a nice uppercut on the inside once Lineker had closed right in. Now, getting after Lineker's eyes, I will always recommend, but I don't know if Sandhagen, he doesn't really he's again one of these fighters who can use the jab, but tends to use it sporadically. But what he does do is get to the body a lot, and both these guys do, which is why I am so ready to enjoy this fight, because I just love bodywork. But Sandhagen gets to the body early and often. And against iron-jawed bangers who are going to drive the pace at you, if your plan is to, like, attrition damage is the thing to do. You're probably going to struggle with low kicks, which is where Sandhagen does a lot of good work. But if the guy's always moving forward, you're going to have trouble stopping and kicking without having something come back at you or just being bundled over if they catch your leg. But working the body of someone who's moving forward constantly, firstly, can make them reconsider it and settle down a bit because they don't want to keep running their solar plexus onto your knee or whatever. But secondly, will slow them down through the effects of bruising up the midsection and making it harder to breathe. There was one of Tyson's early opponents, can't remember what his name was. Was it Tubbs? It was the fat dude. But he had this idea, he was like, I'm going to get to Tyson's body. And no one ever really did, actually, in the long term. There were guys who had success against Tyson later on, but they didn't really do that. There was guys with long jabs who made use of it and fainted him out a lot, like Douglas and Lewis. There was Holyfield, who did a lot of headbutting and breaking off his combinations in the kitchen with like a high forearm block into the right hand off every time Tyson threw the right hand. But there weren't really many dudes who went to the body. And I remember being surprised at the time how it did seem to annoy Tyson a lot. Because, if you've been working your entire time on making your head elusive and getting guys to swing for it while you move in and hit over the top or underneath, when they're hitting your body, that's not at all elusive because the body and feet were always going straight at the opponent. It was his head that was moving around all over the place. I think Tyson finished that one quite quickly, but I do remember being surprised by that guy having success. Of course, John Lineker is not Mike Tyson. His head doesn't move at all, unless the other guy's moving it with his punches. But I think what I've seen from Sandhagen is that he will throw like a couple of tippy-tap punches and then move into hit knees from like a double collar tie or collar tie around the guard. That just a quick hold in knee. I think that would be fabulously useful against Lineker here. Of course, the scary thing about hitting the body against good bangers is that you have to drop your hand to do it. Your hand has to go down below your jaw or your guard to hit him in the body, which can be scary, especially as Lineker does a lot of his best work with the left hook in exchanges. He's not a particularly slick counterfighter, but if you have the great left hook and you throw it constantly, you will win like 50% of exchanges if you do it blind. Well, you should win 50% of exchanges anyway. You'll win a lot of exchanges just doing it blind. That's why the left hook is the king of the counterpunches, because it catches people from the side out of nowhere while they're doing shit. Something that sort of concerns me in this fight is Sandhagen's takedowns. I've seen him attempt a couple in the UFC, I think. He got into that weird grappling exchange with Batista where he sort of got toppled, got taken down while he was winning the fight, having knocked the dude down, but then went straight into a triangle, which was really nice, finished the armbar from there. Against Austin Thingy, he chased a very long takedown, completed it, it was lovely, looked lovely, but he did come from a long way out, and it was sort of like duck the head and go for the leg. Sort of like Interborough used to do back in the day when he was trying to change things up or shorten ideas. And Donald Cerrone does this too, it's like, rather than strike against your guard or whatever to get in range to take the dude down, you'll just, from outside of that striking range, drop your head and run in. And Cerrone does this all the time. But Hindenbrow used to do it a lot too, and I remember right now in the Killing the King. Actually working on a Killing of the King at the moment for the first time in 4 or 5 years, so be excited for that. Sandhagen does that, or did that, when I last saw him try and take a dude down, and Lineker's whole thing, his takedown defense, is guillotine and then pull the guy up by his head. So, if I can see if Sandhagen gets into trouble, this could go like straight down Satan's dick hole. Just, one thing getting worse, go to the second thing, it gets worse from there. But really we get to see an interesting wrinkle to Sandhagen's game here, because I can't see... Lineker, like Stevens, is one of those opponents where you cannot just, no matter how good you are, you can't bullheadedly go in and say, I'm going to back him up and win the exchanges and knock him out, because he has these freakish genetic advantages over so many of these fighters. You can't train an amazing chin. He just has one. So, Sandhagen has done a great job of getting out there, taking the center of the cage, using lots of feints, and just flustering dudes really badly. And I think in this fight, you're going to have to see him work more elusively and defensively. And I haven't seen much of that yet. And when he did take the pressure off a couple of his opponents, he backed himself onto the fence by accident. Whether that was being lazy because he was so much better than the opponents already, we'll soon find out. But yeah, Cory Sandhagen, he's hot right now. Let's see how he does. What else we got going on that card? Oh, Jim Miller's back in action. Seems like he fights all the time at the moment. But he's back in action against Jason Gonzalez, who, if you remember, is fucking huge. He fought Gregor Gillespie. Well, has he fought since Gregor Gillespie? No, he hasn't fought since he lost to Gregor Gillespie, and that was 2017. So it had a bit of a layoff. But he had an amazing fight with Drew Dober back in 2016. Both of those great fights he lost, which is kind of like, you're guaranteed for excitement, but you're also on the losing end of it. Ooh. But yeah, Jim Miller is a good fight for anyone in that lightweight division because he is a legend. He's still very capable of impressive stuff, but he is also very much on the downward slope. You know, take away that win over Alex White, that was the night when Craig White and Alex White were just competing to be the worst white in the UFC. And, take that away and he's on a 5-fight losing streak. You know, he lost to Poirier, which was a great fight, admittedly, and Pettis, which was a good fight, admittedly. And then Francisco Trinaldo and then Daniel Hooker. Hooker knocked him out with a knee. That sounds familiar. Oh, happened to Ross Pearson too. And then that win over Alex White, which really doesn't matter. And then Charles Oliveira just picked him up and ragdolled him like he was nothing. So yeah, very much on the downward slope, but still dangerous and capable. I expect he'll probably get on Gonzalez's back and murder him, to be honest. But Gonzalez is huge and throws a lot of kicks, so maybe Miller will eat a head kick or something. Not going to give you a great deal of in-depth analysis on that because, just not really worth looking into that much. What else is going on? Fucking hell, Andrei Arlovsky's on this card against Augusto Sakai. Wow, we're giving the old boys easy fights at the moment. Didn't he just have a tune-up? Oh no, I was thinking of someone else who fought. It was JDS fought Blagoy Ivanov. Yeah, no, lost that decision to Tuivasa, lost to Shamil Abdul. Oh, we'll talk about him later. Lost to Walt Harris by split decision. So he's on a 3-fight losing streak, but he hasn't been knocked out since Ngannou. Wow, that's impressive for Arlovsky. If you wonder why Arlovsky and Overeem are never ever going to hang it up, it's because both of them get paid $500,000 every time they fight. And they're getting given schlubs at this point. Someone says you want to come back and fight not very dangerous regional heavyweight for the $400,000 fight we have to offer you contractually at this point. Yeah, you're going to say yes. Ben Saunders is about against Takashi Sato. That'll be fun. Glover Teixeira versus Ion Cutelaba. That's been moved. That one was another cursed fight. In fact, Lineker and Sandhagen and Teixeira and Cutelaba were all on for the same card, weren't they? But that one's been moved around 7 or 8 times now. Cutelaba was injured back in January when they first planned to do it. Had that good win via TKO against Antigulov. After coming back from USADA suspension. I think he was out for a whole year for that one. Yeah, he was. But Kutalaba's a fun guy. Good hitter, not an amazing technical striker, setting up his punches. Teixeira is one thing, really. It's just that counter overhand, the cross counter. I remember pointing that out when he was about to fight John Jones. And I think it was Chad Dundas on the co-main event podcast was like, that hit piece that Jack Slack put out earlier this week. I was like, I didn't read it to be a hit piece. He just only does 3 things, cross counter, single leg, arm triangle. That's the whole Glover Teixeira skill set there. He did bring in a jab a couple of times. Again, it's another one of these guys who connects 3 jabs, 1 fight, and then goes, yeah, my jab's pretty good, and then never visits it again. Yeah, Teixeira's a weird one. Guys were convinced he was a world champion a little while ago. And there's still guys who are like, it's just because he arrived too old. And you're like, well, he had the same game forever. You watch him against Marvin the Beastman Eastman, and it is just try and counter him with the overhand until he falls down. And it's still the same. But he is a deceptively good top player. That last fight he had where he was elbowed in the brainstem, referees are so fucking bad at calling that. That's why we need to just ban all downward elbows. I mean, it's a great weapon for a striker if you're pushed against the fence, but it's so hard to call because 1 in the back of the head is enough to ruin your night. If you throw 4 or 5 elbows and one of them hits the back of the head, the referee won't see it. There was Emil Meek's last fight. He was just elbowing straight down on the back of the guy's noggin. The ref was doing nothing. Just being like, yeah, they're arced. You're an idiot, mate. But yeah, Glover Teixeira took some bad ones, went limp for a second, still came back and finished his lad, whose name I can't even remember, so that tells you how important that was. Cole Robertson, that's the one. But he did lose to Corey Anderson before that, which I totally don't remember, because I totally don't remember any Corey Anderson fights. He's on a completely checkered record. It's just loss, win, back to that Anthony Johnson one. God, I miss Rumble. Can we talk a minute about how Rumble is now trying bodybuilding within months of starting bodybuilding, he's up to 300 pounds, and dudes are like, well, maybe he used steroids to get there, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm sure he just jumped straight into that, coming off fighting. Like, oh, well, I've avoided steroids my entire fighting career, but, stick it in me, fam. Oh, just crazy. Some guy was getting on at me today about being like, about looking askance at Paulo Costa, who is pending a decision on his USADA violation, pending how money they reckon he is what that means. But some guy was going like, oh, Sage Northcutt's way roidier, and no one says anything about him. Yes, Sage Northcutt is well roidy. There are a lot of roidy lads in this sport. Someone was saying the other day, like, does TJ Dillashaw's use of drugs indicate being weak mentally, blah blah blah? No, like, if you choose not to do performance enhancing drugs in professional sports at the highest level, you are knowingly handicapping yourself. That's what it is, and a mad respect to you if you genuinely do that, because you can't even prove it. It's literally unprovable. No one is going to test your blood every day. It's far too expensive. But that's the price you pay for having principles, you know? If you are choosing to use performance-enhancing drugs at the highest levels of the sport, you recognise what professional sport is, and you're just going along with it. It's insane, the number of people who are like, oh, weak mentally, wow, you know. But enough about drugs, sorry. Where were we? Clever to share it, yeah, whatever. I mean, really, who gives a fuck? It'll be a fun one, at least, because that's a fight. That's an opponent who is going to give him the kind of fight that he can win. You know, counter right hand into the left hook every single time. Mike Perry versus Alex Oliveira. That's a good one, because Perry can stop a takedown. Alex Oliveira is a good banger, very dirty fighter, extremely dirty fighter. Grab the fence, elbow the back of the head, do everything he can to win a fight. Has a good front kick to the body. Kinda herky-jerky in his striking. I know we're not allowed to say herky-jerky anymore. Kinda spastic in his striking. Perry surprises me on occasion. You know, against Jake Ellenberger, suddenly he's throwing step-up kicks and hitting beautiful elbows on the break. Other times he's like flat-footed, just swinging wide. I can't remember the Don Cerrone fight entirely, but I seem to remember that he stopped Cerrone's long, lunging takedown quite easily, and then ended up on the bottom off taking Cerrone down. Is that what happened? I can't remember, but he could have made Cerrone stand with him in that fight and tried to overwhelm him, as every opponent who has tried to do that to Donald Cerrone has had a good degree of success with. Greg Hardy's back in the co-main event because we like controversy bucks. How do people who view the fights in disgust show up on the ratings? No different than people who view the fights because they want to watch them. Bringing attention to the UFC, whatever. Dmitry Smolyakov, 9-2 as a heavyweight. That could mean he's good, that could mean he's shit. Who knows? Fought in the UFC twice before, got finished easily both times by Cyril Asker, of all people, fucking hell. Won a regional show, came back. Cool. Expect Greg Hardy to either smoke him or look like garbage once he gets tired. And then your main event is Ronaldo Jacare Souza versus Jack Hermansson. If you haven't seen it, I will link it in the description, but there is a Filthy Casuals guide to Jack Hermansson. Have I explained why I call it the Filthy Casuals Guide? A lot of people ask. The Filthy Casuals Guide was originally going to be the an a la carte fight fans guide, because someone once called me an amazing Twitter account with a Guy Fawkes mask thing, saying that he was coming to call out the shills and the fools in the MMA media. He was just like, if you don't watch all fights, you're an a la carte fight fan, mate. It's just this utter cretin, but it was just such a funny phrase. I wanted to use it. However, I thought it'd be a little bit confusing for people who don't have very, very basic French to type in over and over again, so I switched it to Filthy Casual. So it's the opinion of a Filthy Casual, me. But yeah, the Jack Hermansson one just went up. Again, these aren't staying up long. I take them down after fight week because the UFC have been pretty good to me so far, and I don't monetize them. They're just there for fun, for the people who want to watch them. But yeah, we were talking about Jack Hermansson in that. His weird striking with the running around at long distance. The fact that he doesn't really have any gap closing weapons. He uses a long low-line side kick or a step-up inside kick, and then he has to run into his right hand or his right leg. Telegraphs it a lot, gets caught in single legs and things off that, or counterpunched. And the fact that he, under fire, he really only has one go-to, and that's to lift both elbows up really high in front of his head and move back on a straight line. Lots and lots of striking stuff that's not great about him. needs to find some coaches who will help him bring it all together, tighten up his defense, make him more comfortable under fire. But good hitting from the clinch. I've always really enjoyed that when he was smashing Askren with uppercuts from inside from the single collar tie. I like that a lot. And that new seated Katagatami or seated arm triangle, the one that looks like an arm in guillotine but with the arm all the way across the body so that it's actually a triangle choke. That is so money. Love it. He did it in his he won his last 2 fights with it. Did it in his last 3. Almost caught Talas Leites. He's a very respected black belt with it. Is he going to catch Jacare Souza with it? Well, maybe. I mean, Jacare. If there's one thing I could say about Jacare, it's that his takedowns really haven't blown me away. You know, if you compare him to someone like Weidman, who's very good at picking up his takedowns, because he gets his takedowns in with his boxing. You know, he's jabbing in, suddenly he's reaching for a snatch single, he's just pulled you out off your feet. He's just swung you out, you know, your legs out from under you. The old heave-ho. Or he'll, like, double right hand and shoot straight into the fence and bounce you off it with the double leg. Very good at timing those short takedowns just to capitalize on. You know, it's like we say about, he's a lot better than Dustin Poirier, but we say about, I'm saying so much about Dustin Poirier lately. I'm just in love with this guy. I really didn't care, and then I watched all those fights to do the Filthy Casuals Guide, and his improvement has been amazing. But just those short drop level changes along the fence to pull the legs out and things like that, it's really more timing than anything else. And Jacare doesn't really do that. Jacare, when he wants the takedown, he's diving after the takedown. If you watch the Boich fight, he's like a wild animal. Like, Boich is coming out with one foot still in Jacare's grip, and Jacare's crawling after him on all fours. If he wants to take down, he's going after it wholeheartedly, and that's really how Whittaker did him in. You know, Whittaker, firstly, great at stopping a takedown, but also great at getting up from a takedown without exposing himself too much. Always building up along the fence, scraping the opponent off, not letting them put any hooks in, separating the hands, turning into them. And Souza looked so lost in that fight. You know, I went back and I watched a load of old Jacare fights, and he has always hit the body well. He's done a lot of that. He has a nice front snap kick into the body that he uses. He has some nice body hooks that he's always used, but really, they were the fight changer against Weidman when he was getting jabbed up. But against Whittaker, it was like once his takedown stopped working, he was just the right hand. He wasn't doing anything else. You know, he could have made it easier on himself by low kicking or get into the body, throwing some combinations, doing things like that. But it became like he was more blinkered, had tunnel vision, the worse things went for him takedown-wise. And Whittaker was expecting the right hand off everything he threw, so it was a jab straight into the shoulder roll every time, pivoting out that way. Never really landed many good counters off it, but kept himself very safe with his hand down, which is quite cool. You know, I'm so big on the shoulder roll in MMA right now, but that's a great example of it, if you want to watch that. Jabbed him up. I mean, Weidman and Whittaker both really set to Jacare with the jab. I think because a lot of what he does, he's quite static, he's quite wooden in his stance. You know, he's not moving his head, he's not ready for punches. He's just sort of like waiting and then having to react. It's like I think Michael Chandler was a great example of that back in the day. Michael Chandler versus Eddie Alvarez 2. Alvarez uses the jab really well because Chandler will pull his head way back and throw the right hand, and he does it really fast, but he's coming from a stationary start and he only wants to move his head when the punch is coming. You know, if you watch very good defensive or evasive boxers, they're moving their head all the time, and then when the punches come, they're already in motion. Reactionary head movement. And Aldo's another one who does this a lot. You know, if you can get dudes just tearing their head out of the way, you can really tire them out with feints and jabs. With that being said, what I love about Jacare is the moments in his fights when you go, oh, we took one of the best grapplers ever. You know, he left years ago, competitive jiu-jitsu, but he was still already considered one of the best ever. We took one of the best grapplers ever, and we said, work with the cage now. And while he doesn't do cool takedowns off the cage that often or anything clever like that, you will see him like the Kamosi guard pass where he literally puts his toes in the fence and walks around. He's done a few like that where he'll use the fence to like lift his hips over the opponent's butterfly hooks. Had his toes right in the fence back then. I can't remember if they changed the rules or just no one was calling it back then, but it was really flagrant. But who was I watching him against? I think it was Bristol something or other. Really not an important guy, but it did a good job defending himself against Jacare for 2 rounds. But Jacare would get the clinch, and then he'd put one hook in, like body lock from the bag, and then he'd step on, like put his foot up to like shoulder height on the cage, and push off it to pull the opponent down into like back control. And he did it twice in that fight. If you watch the Kimura he caught on Boich, it's because Boich is sliding up along the fence with his hand down. Same as Phil Davis caught on, who was that? Fuck, I can't remember. Might have been Manny Newton in Bellator. The hand goes down to facilitate the wall walk, and then you go for the arm. And again, Gagard slid back to the fence, sat up against it. Jacare immediately stepped over and guillotined him, standing over him. So it's really interesting watching some of the things he has done with the fence. It's just that his takedowns tend to be being Mr. Black Explosive 3000. It's just like, I'm taking you down now, and anytime you try and defend it, I'm just going to pick you up and try and throw you onto your back. Problem is that Hermansson gives up a lot of overhooks. He likes working off the overhook. He'll hit Uchimatas and things like that. Again, another similarity to Poirier, which is weird, but Ferguson and all these guys who are great at front headlock stuff. When they're on top, they'll sort of float on you and let you get the underhook so that they can clamp down on it and move to the front headlock and start dancing or turning you and things like that. But it does mean that guys like Talis Latis can come up and sweep him quite effectively. Talis Latis kept getting the underhooks along the fence and just throwing him down. Latis was well on track to win that fight. It was a heroic effort by Hermansson because he was badly injured from, I think, about the second round. And he still pulls it off just by tenacity, really. But we talked about, go watch the Filthy Casuals guide, but one of the things that bothers me in this fight is how much Hermansson lets his elbows get open from side control and half guard, bottom. He has one arm over the opponent's back all the time, which is arm triangle city, and that's what Jacare has done quite a lot in his jiu-jitsu career. He used to do like a hop across thing from side control, but even in his MMA career, he submitted 3 guys with arm triangles. He's more than happy to just take that and finish with it. And even if that you don't finish with it, that's a very legit guard pass, is to just jam your head in there, go for the arm triangle, and start working your way out of half guard. So I think that could be problematic for him. I hope Jacare comes in and pounds the body a lot, because I quite enjoyed that against Weidman. Neither of these guys particularly smooth or slick strikers, but Jacare is certainly improving-ish, but he is 40 years old. Hermansson really needs a lot of work. He's sort of like reminds me a bit of Joachim Hansen, where your striking exists just to make you more of a threat in another area. Hansen could hit really well, much better than Hermansson can for his class, but he never really learned to box. He was just like, yep, that's another facet to my game. I'm just going to take punches and hit people, even though grappling's my main thing. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for that card. Let's talk about some of the stuff that I saw last weekend, just quickly, because we're eating up time today. So Overeem versus Olenek, UFC St. Petersburg. Some pretty good finishes on this one, I thought. Magomed Mustayev, who I hadn't seen in quite a while, he's been off for like 2 years or something like that, but he fought Kevin Lee a little while ago. If you remember that one. Oh, that literally was his last one before he went away, but that was the one where Lee was doing his Lee thing, just being an incredible smothering top player, but I think Mustayev hit him with a jump spinning back kick to the midsection and just winded him badly. But the guy's got an awesome kicking game, and he showed it in this fight. It did a spinning back kick to the head without the guy bending down. That's normally where you see him, like the Barao Wineland one, or the Musasi Hall one. You'll go for a back kick to the body, and they'll be doing like an outside slip at the same time, and their head will come down into it. Nope, just kicked him in the head. He was standing straight up, and he did it anyway. Pretty incredible. Shamil Abdul versus Marsh Interborough. Both these guys apparently top 15 heavyweights. God, this was bad. This was so fucking bad. Marsh Interborough has revamped his training program, and he's doing these weird shifty back and forth things, and then he throws a jab, and he's throwing it vertical fist, and it's awful. Really bad. It's really more him opening himself up to counters than it is him hitting the dude. So, yeah, when he got stopped, I was like, yep, good. Balance has been restored to the world. Don't want to see him doing that too much. Vertical jab, totally legit. Dudes do it. Mayweather does it. Oscar De La Hoya did it. But, yeah, just what was Marcin Tybura doing in that fight? He looked terrible. That one between Alexiuk and Antigulov, which was just one guy running forward, the other guy countering, going backwards. Really, that's just, the lesson is, if you can strike going backwards, you will win a lot of fights in this sport, because a lot of dudes in this game only know how to strike going forwards and think that if you get on the front foot, you're winning. Especially if they're skittish about the whole thing. These guys aren't coming in from long boxing or kickboxing pedigrees. A lot of them are just grapplers who've learned to sort of bang decently, and they'll run in straight after you. And if you can counter going backwards, you're laughing. What else was good? Oh, Roxanne Modafferi beating Antonina Shevchenko. Props to Roxy. She showed a ton of heart in that fight. And it's always hilarious watching Shevchenko fanboys just completely lost for words. But then they don't really take losses or anything like that. Every time the next fight comes around, it's going to be another merciless knockout, even though neither of them knocks anyone out. Sergey Pavlovich versus Marcelo Golm went pretty much how we expected. Golm got starched easy. Pavlovich swung awkwardly at him and finished him. And then people were like, oh my god, Sergey Pavlovich, I'm so excited, he's the future of the heavyweight division. You're like, slow down. Slow down. As I said on Twitter, a 250-pound sack of gravel is an exciting young prospect at heavyweight. Then Islam Makhachev versus Armen Sakurian. I poo-pooed this lad's chances. I was like, he's coming into the UFC for his first fight in the co-main event. What's that about? He was brilliant. This was a really good fight. Tons of quality back and forth wrestling. Makhachev hitting that beautiful Sasai Surakomiashi, the foot sweep, doing the cross grip with it too. First round, he hits the sweep straight into mounting over the arm, threatening the triangle. Gorgeous stuff. But Sakurian was with him every step of the way. Sakurian looked a good deal smaller to my eye, but just kept an amazing pace with this guy who AKA are always touting as like their best rounded fighter and the future of the game. It was a great fight because Islam Makhachev looked every bit the real deal, and Sakurian looked far better than expected. And then Olenek versus Overeem. My boy Sean Madden told me that Overeem would win by stepping knee. I appreciate that because literally in the one before this and every preview, I've always gone, Overeem has amazing knees. I wish he'd use those knees more. He should just knee. Everything else, forget it. And this fight, he did. It was, I'm not going to punch, I'm not going to kick. I'm just going to wait for him to get close and then I'm going to knee him. And it worked wonderfully. There was a cool little Olenek trick play early on. He does a few things, sort of Hail Mary submission attempts. And, if they don't go well, he hasn't lost anything, except his wind, But he pulled guard, ended up on the bottom, closed guard, double underhooks. And we like double underhooks from closed guard because it stops people hitting us. But, you'll see guys like Rob Whittaker use it to get butterfly hooks and then start sweeping. But Olenek opened his legs and got onto one side so that Overeem would be tempted to just jump over them. And then Olenek would come up on his back. And I was looking at it going, why is he not jumping over? Oh, wait, no, don't jump over those legs, Overeem. And Overeem was clever enough to just sit his butt back and drag himself away from going over the guard. He's offering you a free guard pass so that you jump past and you can come up on a single leg or go to your back. Tricky man. A fun fighter. And he went for the Ezekiel in standing clinches and things too. And Overeem was just like, nope, not having it, mate. So yeah, not a bad night of fights, and Rising was pretty good. Kyoji Horiguchi versus Ben Nguyen was the best fight as predicted. Ben Nguyen took it to him, and what was interesting was, and again, it's something that holds true in boxing and kickboxing and MMA, counterpunchers, counterfighters, the more you put on them, the harder it is for them to pick it's like driving through a car park and being like, too much sodding choice. I can't decide, an empty car park, can't decide where to put my car. Or a nearly empty car park. If there's a couple of cars in there, you're like, oh, I don't want to park next to them. But if you just said Ben Nguyen's just going to run at him and keep kicking and punching, you'd be like, yeah, well, Kyoji's going to launch him through the air with the right hand. But there were moments in that fight where Kyoji's sort of trying to get space to line up the counter, and Ben Nguyen's just going, nah, mate, and pouring it on him. Kyoji looked a little bit flustered by it, which is the opposite approach to just sort of like sitting back and not giving him any opportunities, but then not doing anything. But Kyoji did land his good counters, did land good punches out of the clinch, knocked him out. 12-fight winning streak I think he's on now. Easily the best fighter Japan's ever produced in terms of skill all round. Could be the best flyweight in the world because, like I said, that Johnson fight happened so young into his career. And he's been with ATT since then. However, there was a classic Kyoji moment in this fight where he swung past and gave up his back, which isn't good. Man, if you saw the wrestling in this fight, it's two dudes who train at good academies and are used to the clinch fighting game, went to the ropes immediately and were falling through the ropes for a lot of the fight. This thing that like wall and stall and leaning on the fence doesn't happen in the ring is bollocks, because it does. You lean on the ropes and then you start falling through, or you push the opponent into the ropes and they start falling through. The rope's terrible. Everyone knows this. But anyway, let's move on. Couple of questions and then we'll get the fuck out of here. Hey Jack, big fan of the podcast and all the content you put out. I have a question for you. What is your assessment of Weidman as it stands now. He has lost 4 of his last 5, and if I remember correctly, Gastelum, aka Mini Fridge Monster, was boxing him up pretty good. He looked good against Sousa, but just seems to have some bad luck. Do you see him winning against people like Izzy or Rob? Cheers from the US, Josh. See, this is the thing. Like, if you put him in a match with Rob Whittaker or Izzy, I would say, yeah, there's every chance of him winning that fight. However, he does seem to... He's got a lot of skills, but he does seem to really struggle the longer the fight goes on. And it could be a conditioning thing. It could be... I think a lot of it's probably a mental thing, because you can almost see him break in these fights. He starts out strong. He's hitting all his takedowns. You know, like Mousasi was just working all over him. Passing his guard easily, almost getting his back, snatch singles, easy as you like, and then suddenly just hits a wall, and then it stops going his way, and then it's all just downhill from there. Same thing happened, Yoel Romero a little bit less so, but he was having a good fight against Yoel Romero, and then just got kneed in the head, which is kind of sad, but then that's what Yoel Romero does. But again, a lot of it is just getting into these late rounds and not being as good as in the early rounds, which is why the Gastelum fight's so weird, because he sort of outlasted Gastelum. I think he is a little bit too hittable. Everything he does looks mechanically decent enough. You know, he was keeping himself safe against Anderson Silva, which is, more than you could ask from anyone. And he was doing a decent job keeping himself safe against Jacare, and Jacare had to go to the body to get him. But, I think, especially like the Jacare fight, I think he wasn't really building off that jab as well as he could do. I think more kicks. He always did well with low kicks. The thing about that wheel kick that got him taken down against Rockhold has made people be like, oh no, he can't kick. He always did well with the short, stumpy low kicks. His kicks weren't as pretty as Anderson Silva's, but he kicked with him comfortably and won the kicking exchanges. I like him when he's pressuring. I like him when he's kicking. I like him when he's hitting those short takedowns along the cage or those snatch singles just out of the boxing exchanges. Yeah, I really don't know what's up with him, because he's got all the skill. He just can't really put it together. And he does seem to be getting a little bit more fragile, which is kind of worrying, because there's not really a lot you can do about that except maybe cut less weight. But then you've got to go up to 205, which is just giants compared to him. Because, I've seen Chris Weidman in person, and I'm not a huge guy, but he wasn't particularly huge next to me. He's got a big old head and a huge ass. That's my main takeaways from that. But he wasn't like a giant. Whereas Luke Rockhold, you do look at him and you go, yeah, that guy's pretty big. So yeah, I don't know what is next for him. I think, to be honest, he could benefit from going to Bellator. They got Mousasi, who's a very good... He's an alright middleweight. But, that rematch I wouldn't be averse to seeing, but at least get Weidman there to beat up some old men and some scrubs first. Put him in with Brandon Halsey, Carvalho, he'll murder those guys. Machida at this point. Cheers, Josh. Hey, Mr. Slack Explosive. As a brackets podcast, close brackets, educated casual MMA viewer, it seems that the past few years have seen BJJ attacks from the bottom fall from favour, with top control being far more beneficial. It was awesome seeing Izzy nearly cinch up a triangle recently, but that seems all too rare. My question is, how would a very skilled bottom player fare against Habib's top game? That seems like one of the most exciting questions that would be answered by Tony versus Habib, but we all know how cursed that fight is. Thoughts? ? Keep it up. From John. Yeah, I say it in every podcast, but triangles almost never happen now. Armbars from the bottom you will almost never see. Armbars from the top are quite rare too, because dudes don't like giving up top position. Submissions tend to be guillotines, because you can pick them up off shots, like panic shots and regular shots. And rear naked chokes, because they happen when dudes get hurt by punches. The positional submission that you'll see all the time is the arm triangle, or not all the time, but occasionally, because that just comes when guys are dominating top control. But no, like the bottom triangle or the triangle choke generally, really, really rare. I think there were 3 in the UFC last year or the year before. Izzy almost hit one, but again, it was going through a scramble. It wasn't like he was playing the bottom game and had to throw up the triangle. Krokop almost caught Fedor in a triangle at one point from like a scramble. Oh no, I think that was just Fedor throwing himself through the guard like a wild man, like he used to. But I think dudes are just too good at keeping their elbows where they need them, or stacking up and landing short elbows and things like that, or using the cage. You are not going to triangle or armbar a dude if you're stacked up against the cage with your hips over your head. Watch Yair Rodriguez versus Frankie Edgar for that. I think, people were talking about like Ortega versus Habib, which would be, on paper, sounds interesting, but I think Ortega really has a big part of the bottom game missing, to be honest. If you watch him in fights like the Tavares one, he'll fight from the bottom and he'll refuse to try and stand up. And then when Tavares pushed him against the fence, he stayed there not being able to attack properly and getting hit. and then he finally went, oh, okay, I'll stand up now, when Tavares gave him too much space. But I think to have an effective bottom game in MMA, you've got to be posting on the hips, pushing away, trying to move towards the fence to get up, hitting with elbows all the time. You've got to be working everything, stand up, submission, sweep. It's simple when you say it like that, there's three of those, but I don't think you're going to beat someone like Habib by just laying on your back going, I'm going to submit him. I think you've got to make him try and keep you down, like Tony Ferguson did to Kevin Lee, the most famous triangle in recent years, because he was always shrimping, moving, putting his feet on Kevin Lee's hips, elbowing him constantly, so that Kevin Lee was in a state where, and also, all the stand-up stuff tired Kevin Lee out and so on, but Kevin Lee was in a state where he was like, just got to stay on top of him. He's sort of throwing himself back onto him at the end, and that's where the triangle came. The triangle is not, you are not seeing dudes hit slick setups for triangles. You're seeing them hit them, well, you're not even seeing them hit them, but you'll see them hit in scrambles or when dudes are tired and making mistakes. And dudes make mistakes when you keep making people keep you down, making people deal with elbows, making people keep following you with their hips. If you keep moving your hips, they have to follow you with their hips. I think that's the secret to success there. I think the other thing is that Habib is so good against that standing up along the fence game. You might have to see someone do what Ken Shamrock did to Tito Ortiz back in the day, where this was before the wall walk was a thing. He was like, I've got to stay away from the fence. So every time Tito shuffled him towards the fence, he'd pull Tito down on top of him, open his legs out, and use his same side leg and arm to push along the fence and turn himself back towards the center of the cage. Yeah, I think it'd be very, very, very interesting if we ever get Tony versus Habib. Because Tony doesn't wall walk all that much, but he does stay super active off the bottom, and he can wall walk. But I don't see him getting trapped in that position where he's like, one ankle is underneath Habib's legs, and he's trying to stand up along the fence. I think he'd probably just dive back towards the center of the ring, or cage rather, to his guard, and keep elbowing and working. And I can't overstate how important I think the elbows from the bottom are. Because, that's the only thing you've got to keep the other guy working. If we had up kicks, that'd be great, but we don't. So, that's half the guard game as a fighting method gone. Anyway, cheers, John. Right, I reckon that'll do us for this week. I'll be back Monday to talk about all the fights that happen, whether Cory Sandhagen is the real deal, whether John Lineker inexplicably chins his way through another fight. But if you haven't seen the Filthy Casual's Guide to Jack Hermansson, go check it out. Share it with your friends and family. Buy a billboard outside your house and print the URL in Comic Sans. Anything you can do to get more people to see that. If you want to email the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to join the Patreon, we got the new Boxer Rebellion episode up now, and hoping to get a Dream episode out this week, hopefully. If you want to see what I'm up to at any time, I'm going to probably write an article this week, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Cory Sandhagen bless.